You are listening to the Mary Jane Society podcast, where you will meet entrepreneurs, cultivators, scientists, doctors, and inventors in the cannabis industry.
I'm your host, Pam Schmiel, marketer and publicist in the cannabis industry. While magazines continue the struggle to survive and many are closing, Peter Shafran is jumping into the magazine game. He's the founder and publisher of The Other, a new cannabis lifestyle magazine featuring the New York City and Hudson Valley. Peter is known in the Hudson Valley for producing river spirit music events and other productions. The Other magazine is just the beginning of Peter's elaborate plan to celebrate the culture and educate the public about cannabis. He shares his vision in the interview. Let's welcome Peter.
Could give us an elevator pitch for The Other.
Sure. So my name's Peter Shafran. I'm the publisher of The Other magazine. And we created The Other magazine basically to fill a crucial gap in both New York City and the Hudson Valley by treating cannabis culture with sophistication, with authenticity, and speaking to both experienced consumers and the canna curious. We're pretty much the only magazine in the area that is talking to the consumers. And so we created this after looking at everything that's out there, which is mostly industry and trade magazines. And so having lived for the most of my life in the Hudson Valley and in this area, we decided to base it in the Hudson Valley, but also looking at New York City as our playground, so to speak. And our first issue was launched in October. It's available in every dispensary in our region, all New York City, Hudson Valley, all 9 counties of that. And basically what it really brings together is bridging the upstate and the downstate cannabis communities. And we're not only we're in dispensaries, we're also in other locations that we think would be interested people. And in 2025, we're planning a series of live events so that we'll bring our magazine to those events that will be part of our storytelling. And speaking about storytelling, what we want to do is we want to change the stereotypes. We want to normalize and destigmatize the love of the plant among our communities, both North and South.
Having the magazine focus on the Hudson Valley and New York makes a lot of sense for people who aren't from this area, because there's a lot of spillover of New Yorkers have their second homes or have moved out of the city up into the Hudson Valley. So it's a very much of a New York City vibe, and it makes a lot of sense to combine those two groups. A lot of New York City residents are in that area. So,
and vice versa, a lot of people who live in the Hudson Valley commute to the city. The other thing about the Hudson Valley is that the Hudson Valley is experiencing a boom that in agriculture and commercial products that this region hasn't seen in 50 years or 100 years. There are, besides the dispensaries, the growers, the extractors, all the adjacent flower adjacent and manufacturing facilities that have sprung up in these 9 counties, Westchester being probably the least of them, but Orange County and Dutchess County and all those other places up there are experiencing huge growth, which means jobs and money for
Right.
those communities, for the communities that have embraced it. And just like in the organic food way, people want to see where their food comes from. They want to see, where did that carrot come from?
Mm-hmm.
And so this bridges the gap between the city and the Hudson Valley to say, oh, you're smoking this? Well, guess what? It only comes from an hour away from us.
I love
And
that.
and you can go and I think canna-tourism is going to be huge in the Hudson Valley. It
Yeah.
already is starting. And those are all the reasons that we brought this magazine to the forefront.
And what about tourism? I mean, you would think people would be so interested in visiting the farms, to see what's going on. Are there different farmers up there implementing these different tour groups or some?
Absolutely. So, for instance, I'll just give you an example. Hepworth runs canna-tourism. I don't think they run it, but they are open to it. I know that there are already some tours that are going up there. And just as an example, we took a tour of Urban Extracts. They're going to start doing some tourism this year. And at this point, pretty much, if you want to go see a farm, you can just call them up and say, I'd like to come up. And they would pretty much love to have you. But we're going to start exploding, on the scene as well, working with existing tour companies and also working on our own to start doing canna-tourism in the spring, summer, and fall of 2025.
Oh, so the other magazine will be organizing these tours and kind of expanding out into that area a little bit?
Exactly. We have a bunch of events that we're starting to work on now, live events, canna-tourism, and both in New York, and that's the bridging of the gap, is getting people from the city up into the country.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a whole bunch of things planned for this year.
Oh my God, that's so exciting. It was only a matter of time. And how about wellness retreats?
So that's very interesting. So I've spoken to a number of wellness retreats, both. Well, let me back up a second. In our magazine, it's not just cannabis. We're probably aiming for, at least in our next issue, about a 50-50 ratio. 50% cannabis, the other 50% maybe some cannabis adjacent, but also we want to, in our last issue, we had an article about meditation. We're going to have an article about psychedelics in this issue. So while that's in the general global scheme of plant medicine, we're also talking about music and art and culture, which may be cannabis adjacent, but doesn't have to be, because like everybody else, we like cannabis, but we also like museums, and we also like rock concerts, and we also like jazz. And, so if we can impart that part of the demographics to say, yeah, we know you like cannabis, but you might like this amusement park that you're not going to maybe do cannabis, although you might want to do a gummy before you go in there. But there's so many aspects that are related. And we say the same thing to the advertisers, the same people who advertise in Wine Enthusiast or in these separate niche magazines. Those people buy cars, those people buy homes, those people buy kitchen cabinets. And so if they're advertising in Wine Enthusiast and they're advising in Cigar Enthusiast or whatever it is, why not advertise in our magazine? Those demographics are still buying things just like everybody else.
I like how you're kind of combining that a little bit, because all that stuff, like you said, does all relate. There are things that people who typically smoke are very interested in, like meditation and all those different things. So, and then that kind of leads me to what are your challenges in the business model, like ad revenue? Because magazines, I mean, just in the industry the other day, another magazine announced, or B2B publication announced
Right.
it's closing down, and it's really hard to survive. And here you are coming out with it. So what are the challenges there?
Well, the challenge is we're learning what the challenges are. So the first issue was pretty difficult because people wanted to say, show me the magazine. And so we were able to get some advertising in the first magazine. We actually did pretty well. But a lot of people stayed on the sidelines to see what it looked like. The response to the magazine has been overwhelmingly enthusiastic, and people are now calling us to say, I want to be in the magazine. Yes. So it's still a challenge because not everybody has seen the magazine, but we're in 260 locations. So we're hoping that this next Q1 and Q2 will definitely be the turning point for us, and our rates are comparable with everybody else. But one of the things you said about the magazine closing, we had I had a conversation with Mr. Magazine, who is he goes by Mr. Magazine, and he rates magazine and does reviews and stuff like that. And so we had a very nice conversation, and he was sharing that magazine industry as a whole, historically over the last 20 years, has suffered, but regional magazines are doing well.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
one of the reasons that we set up our magazine as a regional magazine is exactly because somebody who wants to advertise to our demographics, if they're selling product in Utah, doesn't have any connection to us in the Hudson Valley or New York City. So because of the way the cannabis industry is set up, everything is vertically integrated within the state. National magazines, by their very nature, don't work for at least this. And again, because we want to showcase what is going on in our region, those advertisers are much more receptive to knowing that they're going to hit the 250,000 people in our region, that they don't even have to advertise to Buffalo. No offense to Buffalo, but let Buffalo get their own magazine.
That's a really good point, especially since the cannabis industry is so state siloed right now. And
Exactly.
really need those customers. And if you're going to get any brands that are cannabis brands advertising in your magazine, they don't want a national magazine. It makes,
Exactly.
you know,
In terms of being a consumer magazine, think about, you go into any dispensary and you have 300, 500, 750 SKU products. And the average person who comes in, especially the first timer, it's just incredible that they're seeing it. But how do you choose which one to take? Well, hopefully you have a great bud tender who recommends something. But if you're like me, I research everything to death.
mm,
And there are a lot of people like me, and I want to know, is there a difference between sativa and indica? No. Is everything a hybrid? Yes. There's very few products that are actually sativa or actually indica. Everything's a blend now.
yeah.
And the reviews and the ratings that are out there, whether it's from Weed Maps or Leafly or anybody else, they're very subjective. We don't know who's doing the ratings. It's not much better than Yelp.
Mm-hmm.
And while it serves its purpose, we would like to be able to impart that wisdom of our colleagues out there who have been smoking or taking the edibles for the last 5 years, 10 years, or 50 years, to say, okay, this is a great one, and here's why, and here's where you can get it. And
Yeah.
so it's as Cy Sims used to say, an educated consumer is our best customer. I believe that's what Cy Sims used to say.
Well, yes. I mean, I want to know which farm it came from, and I want to know the manufacturer. It really means a lot to me, because especially now, so many new cultivators, licenses are coming out. I feel like I haven't kept up because I'm not solely focused on New York.
Right.
That it's all of a sudden it's kind of getting away from me when I go to look at new products just to see what's out there. So it's important for me to know all those details, especially with all, the problems that can go wrong in cultivation and harm.
Absolutely. You
harm.
know, you look at this in other industries. If you want to be a conscious consumer, you know, flowing from what you just said, if I have a choice, if I, as an example, have a choice of going into a dispensary to saying, I want to buy a women-owned product, well, you can find that, but you can't read the label and see what it says. You have to actually know beforehand. Or I want a BIPOC, or I want something that is a somebody who was previously incarcerated, or I want to get something from
Yes,
40, or I want to get something for 40 tons who works on prisoner projects.
yes,
So, or I want to go to I want to go to a farm that I know is using regenerative growth.
yes.
So or I want to know if the company is growing it outdoors or indoors, or if I'm buying an extract, are they using, which solvent are they using?
Yes,
So it is overwhelming,
it is. And
but
and most people are not educated on it because you really have to dive into it to be educated. So,
exactly. And it's the same thing in, using an example, I said the wine enthusiast. Um, if you're a wine drinker, maybe you're allergic to wine with sulfites in it. So you want to go find the wine that doesn't have the sulfites, or you want to have organic wine, or you want to buy wine that's made in Chile. You want to do your research. If you're like me, you want to do your research before you go into the dispensary. And that's just one little angle of the magazine, and we hope to be able to provide that education, um, and help the consumers.
also, consumption lounges seem to be kind of, opening that door again, and people feel ready to go out and do that. Are you hearing anything about any of the dispensaries really starting to implement their consumption lounge areas? And would you have a part in that as far as, I don't know, entertainment? I know you want to get into the music end of it and combine all that. How's
Right.
that looking?
So I'll answer the second part of the question first. Yes, we would love to be involved in that and help those consumption lounges get their word out. In terms of what's happening today, it's whispers. The reality is that the way the rollout happened is every municipality got a choice, of opting out both on dispensaries but also consumption lounges, and the great majority opted out on consumption lounges.
Mm.
And you look at it and you think, like, even in Westchester here, Tarrytown, White Plains, Portchester, Yonkers, and New Rochelle, the five biggest cities in Westchester, there are no consumption lounges.
Oh,
So I mean, there's two reasons. Number one is you need the location, you need a landlord who lets you do it, and you need obviously a municipality that allows you to do it. But also, people are trying to figure out the economics of it.
mhm.
If you go into a bar, or someplace like that where you're actually buying your drink, with a 400% markup on it,
Mhm.
you can make some money. In the cannabis industry, people are very reluctant to pay tax, let alone a 400% markup in delivery charge. So unless you're doing it within the confines of a dispensary, it's very difficult. Um, and again, if people are bringing in their own weed to smoke, how do you
Yeah, I
forget about
know. This has been
forget
a
about making money? How do you break even?
Yeah, I know. It's been a whole, I know. I've been watching that, wondering how that's going to work. So it'll be interesting to see how Massachusetts is doing it. And oh, I know what I saw. I just read that I thought was kind of interesting. I'm not sure exactly how this would work, but they're saying they're looking at it similar to breweries, like tasting rooms in breweries. So tasting rooms meaning beverages, or tasting rooms meaning like smoke, flower tasting flyers,
Well,
or
well,
flights, I mean.
absolutely. Well, just to give you an example of, and I think our friend Scotty Brenner.
I know of him. Oh,
Yeah,
yes, yes, air.
and he does the Flower Hour. So just as an example, he will work with a restaurant, let's say, or a consumption lounge. He will bring everything in there. So he'll bring in his ganjiers. He'll bring in different types of flour so that people can taste the different things, and maybe two or three vendors who can sample their wares. And I think that's the way the consumption lounges will be able to um, uh, uh, break even or make some money if they can charge a whether it's a dispensary or a grower manufacturer to come in and rent space for the evening or whatever and charge a little bit of admission. I think that's the way it's going to go. Or they combine it with music or other arts where they say it's openly, it's cannabis friendly. You can smoke. There's a dispensary down the street, or you can work with a dispensary that has delivery, and you just have a dispensary that brings their wares to the consumption lounge. I think that's where it's going to go, one of those two directions, or both of those two directions.
Well,
But yeah,
I know, do you know Trends Dispensary
yeah, yeah,
oh, yeah, so they have an adjacent space literally to their dispensary, and they're doing comedy shows, they're doing the yoga, and I just saw that they did a holiday pop-up, so not cannabis related, but the regular little holiday pop-up markets that are everywhere with people
right,
craft products and things like that. So I thought that was a good idea to use that space for, because now they're renting out the space for the vendors to showcase and bringing it in that way. So I thought, and then there they are, right? You have to walk through the dispensary to get there.
right.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of clever, but they seem to be really, kind of going forward, trying to figure out the whole consumption lounge situation. So, um, but okay, so I guess just wrapping it up, I also would love to know, like, I know you have held music events in the past, and it sounds like you're doing all these other great things with the tourism and things like that. What are you going to be renting? Are you going to be getting like one-off event licenses for consumption for these events? Or I guess you would have to, like, what scale are you planning these music events?
Well, so I'll tell you that. Well, I guess the easiest way to say is what we want to do with these events is we want to build community. And, we have these various segments. We have the dispensary owners, we have the bud tenders, we have the growers and extractors, and we have the consumers. And there's really nothing bringing everybody together. And so what we want to do is we want to create meaningful connections between consumers, businesses, and brands. So I guess initially, since we don't have our own space, we're going to partner with other venues to be able to help them promote their events at the same time as being a cultural or media co-sponsor. For example, tonight we're involved in the High and Mighty 2.0, which is the Hanukkah party tonight, and we're a media sponsor for that. But in the same token, we're now talking to different music venues, whether it's just to give you an example, the Capitol Theater in Portchester. I don't know if you ever been there.
I haven't, no.
So it's not you cannot smoke within the music area, but they have a lounge area which you just walk outside, and it's an open space, but the smoke is pretty heavy there. but it is a place where you can enjoy your cannabis and then walk back into the event, so that your smoke is not interfering with everybody else who is
Right.
not smoking. And I think that's the model that seems to be the way to go, because you also want to attract your friends, your spouses, your whatever, who may not like the smoke or may not like the smell or whatever, and so you combine the different things. But when I said about bud tenders, one of the things we did in our magazine in the first issue was we had a bud tender of the month competition.
Oh,
And so we're going to be announcing that in our next issue, the winner of that bud tender event. But when I talked about building community, I've gone into dispensaries. I've gone into hundreds of dispensaries and talked to the actual bud tenders, because the reality is that is who we're building the magazine for. Because the bud tenders are the ones who are giving out our magazines to the consumers. We want them to be part of our distribution network, so to speak. So we talk to the bud tenders, and almost every bud tender, especially the ones who don't work in New York City, if I say to them, when I've said to them, we're going to have a party for bud tenders. Really? Not in New York City, though. Will you have it up here in Westchester? Will you have it up here in Orange County? Will you have it? And the answer is yes, because these are our people, the bud tenders, and not only the bud tenders, but also all the people who work in the marketing, in the processing, and sales, and everything like that. Nobody's doing parties for them. Nobody's bridging the gap between the people who are making it and the people who are consuming it, or the people who are distributing it and the people who are. So we want to build this community. And there are a couple of people that we're working with. And just to announce a couple of things,
yes.
we're going to do a bud tender party in the spring. We're just putting together and finding the actual location. I've spoken to dispensary owners. We want to create a dispensary owners council of some sort, even if it's just once a month to get together and shoot the breeze, and meet each other and say, oh, where do you buy your paper products from? Where do you buy your toilet paper from? The things of running a business that they don't teach you in school, that they don't teach you in the Office of Cannabis Management. They don't tell you how to buy toilet paper. So it's those little things. We've spoken to dispensary owners who've had huge turnover in employees. Why is that happening?
I don't
Well,
know why that's happening. You've been hearing that for
yeah,
a
yeah.
long time, and I don't understand it.
So let's get together, all the dispensary owners, and say, why are you having this problem? How did you fix it?
Yeah.
And share that information. And so I think that's the way you build community
Yeah.
among the industry, and bringing together the consumers to say, here's the person who just grew your weed. Here's the person
Yeah.
who made your gummy. And so, you used one word before that I wanted to jump on,
Okay.
and you said, what is the typical, consumer?
Mm.
And the reality is, as you know, when I talk to somebody and somebody asks me, what does the typical consumer look like in the Hudson Valley in New York City? And the answer is that person, that person, that person, that person. It's every color, it's every shape, size, gender, and age, because we live in a society now where everybody, well, maybe not everybody, many people of all stripes and sizes and shapes are consuming cannabis. And the women side of the market is showing an explosive growth. Because we have things like gummies and pills and extracts and vapes. It just makes it so much easier to consume. And so the demographic of what probably 90% of the public imagines a pot user, they're thinking reefer madness, or they're thinking Cheech and Chong, and they're thinking 60s and 70s vibes. But the reality is It's the same people who were drinking 2 martinis at lunch last year are now popping a gummy before they go out.
Yeah. You're just transferring the format into another,
Absolutely.
yeah, and also all the new form factors coming out is what's leading to this explosion. That's the reason you're touching all these different points where people want to interact with it. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else? I feel like we've covered everything. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with I think it's exciting.
Well, I'll give you my end point to my elevator pitch is, we recognize that New York's cannabis market needed sophisticated, regionally focused media that reflects the maturity, the diversity of modern cannabis culture. And we live in the best part of the entire planet. More people smoke weed in New York City than any place else in the world. And we have the infrastructure coming. We have the dispensaries. We have the cultivation. We want to capture the full spectrum of New York's emerging cannabis landscape, and that's why we do what we do.